positive things about our guest speaker, be totally out of character. So I'll only mention two. One, and I think this is probably the one of the leading or one of the best examples of what political skill can do. In 1984, he ran a campaign that saw people in Illinois vote a ticket of Ronald Reagan and Paul Simon. And if you put that philosophy together and come up with a thing, it's remarkable. But that was one of the great victories, having a U.S. Senate candidate win in a state that was undergoing a Democrat with a conservative Republican landslide. And of course, the other example of our distinguished speaker is that in the last primary, he had the ability to give, he was very much involved with the Obama campaign, probably still is, or else what the heck's he doing here? But he had the ability to have State Senator Obama be endorsed by individuals who are no longer on this earth. And when you can get people to give you endorsements from heaven, that to me shows what a great campaign consultant and advisor he is. A man who has a national reputation, has won races all over the country, occasionally appears on national television, is a lot quieter and a lot smarter than James Carville. I introduce to you the one, the only, David Axelrod.
Thanks, Paul. By the way, Milton Rakoff sent his regards. I wanted to. All I want to say about Paul, I was a middling student at the University of Chicago, and had we had professors like Paul at the University of Chicago, I would have shown up for class. First of all, I want to apologize. When I came to the door, they said, we announced there's a mystery guest, and I was hoping that they had told you in advance that it was me. I didn't want to hear an audible groan when I walked in the room. I think, you buy tickets for Pavarotti and Tony Orlando walks in. It's not a good thing. And I'm sure I heard a number of you say under your breath, hey, I could have had lunch at Manny's with him for a lot less than this. But you all know that Barack is in Springfield. He was summoned down with all the other legislators to Springfield. We hope that there'll be a moment of comedy down there, and that's with an ITY, and maybe something positive will happen. But in any case, he had to do his day job, and looks forward to seeing all of you again at the earliest possible time. I want to congratulate. I've been coming to City Club events for a very long time. They've gotten bigger and bigger over time, and I want to congratulate a couple of guys who I know had a lot to do with it. My friends Tom Roser and Jay Doherty. I think Tom and I are friends. The last time we were on the radio, he called me a reprobate, but I took that as a term of endearment. And Jay, he's done incredible things for this organization, but I think, let's be honest, it's also done great things for him, because when I met Jay years ago, he was a shy, retiring guy. You couldn't get him out. And look at him now. He's really come out of his shell. So I think it's not only been good for the organization, but good for him. Let me just share a few ground rules with you. I know everybody's interested in the Jack Ryan situation, but I work for Obama, and we've been very reticent about talking about that. I have 3 clients who are vying for the vice presidency, so I'm a little reticent about talking about that. Mayor Daley is a client of mine, so the truck thing is... So anyway, how about those Cubs? What I really truly want to do is talk a little bit about the Senate race as best as I can figure what the Senate race is right now, and primarily talk about Obama and why I think we've been successful and why I think we will be successful, and then talk a little bit about the national race. In addition to the Obama campaign, we're working on the Democratic National Committee campaign in the presidential race. So I've spent a lot of time looking at numbers and thinking about that. But let me start with the Senate race and tell you that I'm guardedly optimistic about our chances. And I would say that I would have said that before the events of this week. I think that, and Paul and others have written about this, many of us have talked about it. And I just said to Jay as we were sitting here, if anyone had told me 2 years ago when I began talking to Barack about this race that we would have won in a 7-person primary with 53% of the vote, an absolute majority, given the serious opposition that we had, serious people with serious resources, and I would have said you were crazy. And in all the time that we were talking about scenarios of the race, I don't think anybody ever said, hey, you know what, I think we can get a majority of the vote. That we were hoping to get 38%, 39%, and then we got 53%. And you know, that is the predicate for my analysis of where we're going now, because we wouldn't have gotten 53% of the vote without doing very well across this state. What's particularly impressive was in the suburban areas, 61% in suburban Cook County, 56% in the collar counties in a 7-person race. We got more votes in DuPage County than Mr. Ryan did. You know, that ability to appeal across geographic lines, across economic lines, across racial lines, downstate, in the few, we weren't able to afford to be on television in a lot of the media markets for much more than 4 days. In the ones where we were on television, even for 4 days, you know, we did exceptionally well. And ended up getting a quarter of the vote downstate. But the lesson was when people see Barack, they respond positively to him. And that continues here in the general election. You've all seen the polling numbers. I don't need to review them. They're very positive. But Barack just got back from a downstate swing in which in Carbondale, and most of you are familiar with the state, in Carbondale, 600 people turned out for a fundraiser. It was really kind of unprecedented, the amount of enthusiasm there, and the speakers range from Glenn Poshard to virtually everybody else of significance down there politically, and this has been replicated all around the state. The question is why? What is the great appeal? Well, Barack obviously is someone who presents himself very well. He's an appealing personality. He's got a great story. But, you know, we in the primary, Paul noted this, we cleave pretty closely to Paul Simon, an old client of mine, and someone I miss, because there's a quality about Barack's politics that is very much like Paul's. Barack has that rare ability in politics to, as Cecil Partee used to say, disagree without being disagreeable, to have strong differences of opinion and views with people across the aisle or even in his own party, and yet treat them as opponents on an issue rather than enemies for life. And I think people sense that quality. There's a civility and decency to his politics that I think people miss in our politics today, and particularly as they look at Washington, D.C. So I think that has helped create a larger constituency for him than, as it did for Simon, than some others have enjoyed. I also think that in this particular year, the issues set, and I'm sure I get a robust debate from Mr. Roser and others on this, I think the issue set favors us in Illinois. I think despite the president's enthusiasm about where the economy is, that enthusiasm isn't widely shared around this state from people who are trying to pay their bills, who are trying to pay their health care bills, who are trying to pay their college bills for their kids, who are really working very hard just to keep their heads above water. That is the real measure of the economy for most people, and by that measure we have a lot of work to do before we claim victory. Barack speaks to those voters very, very effectively. He's also someone who's forged interesting solutions to problems, and those, a lot of you in this room I think are aware. On healthcare issues, he's been a leader on a variety of fronts. You're also aware of the work he's done which is emblematic of his style on the issue of taping of confessions to try and deal with this horrendous problem of people being put to death wrongfully for crimes they didn't commit. That took months of negotiation between prosecutors and defense lawyers and police and all interested parties, and it took someone who had the ability to listen in order and react to what he was hearing to get that done. So I think those two qualities, his he has a fulsome kind of approach to the healthcare problem, which is burgeoning to the issue of the exportation of jobs and some of the other things that are on people's minds. We have a very, very good, we're well set up, and the issue of education, which is central to Barack as someone who's really benefited over the years from education and the opportunities he's been given. The other element that's working in our favor here is there's no presidential race here that to speak of, with all due respect to Governor Edgar and others who had a press conference on Monday that was unfortunately overshadowed by other events. There's no evidence. I mean, this is an odd election year, and I'll get to this in a second, but we have 50 states in this country in a presidential race that's going on in 17, where the candidates are actually advertising and spending most of their time. And this has become a Democratic state. There is an inclination to vote for Democratic candidates, and if there's no strong impetus from the Bush campaign to fight back in this state, that's going to redound to our benefit, and it's going to make it harder for the Republican nominee. I know when we get to questions and answers, one of the questions is going to be, who is the Republican nominee going to be? I see on your pink sheets that Jack Ryan's going to be here on June 30th, so I assume it's him. But I don't know when we step out of this room if that's still going to be the case, because things seem to be moving pretty fast today on that front. But whatever it happens, we're not going to change our orientation. I think Barack has been very good about sticking to issues of importance and not getting entangled in the weeds with our opponents, and that's going to continue. In terms of the national race, and I'm going to leave a lot of stuff on the table for you guys. I'd much prefer. I did have several minutes to thoughtfully prepare my remarks, so as such, I'd be better off going to question and answer sooner rather than later. Let me talk about the presidential race. I think that it's fashionable in my party. We do this really, really well. I don't know, Tom, maybe in your party too, but we're very hard on our own. There's a lot of in Washington. There's always a lot of chatter about John Kerry's deficiencies. I think he's doing rather well. Polls suggest that. Washington Post ABC poll had him 8 points ahead in a two-way race, 4 points ahead in a three-way race this week. There were several other polls that suggested the same. And these polls are somewhat misleading because, as I said, this race is really going on in 17 battleground states which were closely contested between Bush and Gore in 2000. And what really matters is what's happening in those states. And so the result of that is I think this race is probably closer in states like California and New Jersey, where there isn't much of a race going on. Although Kerry will win, he won't necessarily win by the kind of margins that you might expect. On the other hand, he's doing very well in these battleground states where the two candidates and others have been going at it since March. And my basic feeling about this is that if an incumbent president continues to be 2 points ahead, 2 points behind going into the final weeks of and months, even the final months of the campaign, it's going to be very, very difficult for him, because at the end of the day, no matter how hard an incumbent president may try, these races are in many ways a referendum on the incumbent. And when people refuse to commit, it's a warning sign for incumbents. I would tell that to my clients. I'm sure his pollsters are telling that, and his consultants are telling that to him. So I expect this race to stay very close from now until the end, and I expect it to break late, and I expect it to break in favor of the challenger. Now, having said that, there are imponderable things, as we've learned, painfully learned as a country. I don't know what, God forbid there should be another terrorist attack between now and November, but no one can say that there won't be. And who knows how that will affect the election. We don't know what's going to happen in Iraq. I think it's fair to say it hadn't gone swimmingly so far, but if it appears that this whole that the interim government takes hold and so on, and people perceive it as improvement, then perhaps he'll get some benefit from that. But that's what he has to hope for. As I said, I think there's kind of a paradox in the economy because the statistics are improving, but I don't think people feel that way. The polls show that. If you sit in a focus group, you'll hear it. People don't feel in their own lives that they're more economically secure. So when the president goes around touting that and calling Democrats pessimists for questioning the improvement, I think it is problematic for him. And in fact, we all remember in 1992 when his father ran and was saying many of the same things. It was perceived as a lack of understanding of the situation that most people find themselves in, and Bush could walk into that. This Bush could walk into that same problem. I'll leave the vice presidential. I don't mind talking about it. I do have several people there, and like I always say, it's like your kids. You love them all. You don't like to choose among them. But I'm happy to talk about the strengths and weaknesses and where I think I go. I would have to say at this point that Senator Edwards, who I had the privilege to work for in the presidential race, has quite a bit of momentum, at least within the party. If there were a referendum within the party, he would clearly be the nominee. I think, Washington now has come to the belief that he should and will be the nominee, which may suggest that he won't be the nominee. That's usually the way it works. Gary Hart once told me Washington's always the last to get the news. That was one of the smartest things anybody ever told me. But he is an enormously charismatic person. He energizes any room that he walks into. In Texas last week, had 9,000 people at the Democratic Party convention down there started chanting VP, VP during his speech. And, the question is how Kerry views that and whether that's what he wants, on the ticket. And that's what he thinks he needs. It takes some strength to put someone like that on your ticket. The Governor Vilsack is another client of mine. Is a splendid guy and has many of the same qualities of Edwards. He's a little lower key. He's a governor. He's got a great personal story, too lengthy to share here, but it's really kind of a Frank Capra type story. Congressman Gephardt is a guy, if you said who among these people would be ready to step into the presidency, I think given his vast and long experience in the leadership in Congress, would have tremendous bona fides in that regard. And then there's another category, which is, do you take someone who's an expert on defense? And there's been a lot of talk in recent days that Kerry is interested in Bill Cohen, the Republican former Secretary of Defense in the Clinton administration, who would fit that category. There had been some talk about General Clark. That seems to have subsided. So I think the one thing that Kerry has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt is that he can keep a secret, because I can't tell you, and no one in this party can honestly tell you, with the exception of perhaps Jim Johnson, who's doing the search, who the vice presidential nominee is going to be. But the handicapping today would be, I think, would be Edwards. Having said that, and I don't even know what time I'm supposed to speak to. That's what I want to say. Why don't we open it up for a question? I've really whipped them into a frenzy. Here's a man you can always count on for a question. By the way, Barack, before you ask your question, Jeff, Barack explicitly asked me to say that all views I express are strictly my own.
Why, of course. Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs, airing every Monday night at 8:30 on cable channel 21 throughout the city of
Thank you
Chicago.
very much.
How was for you, David?
Thank you.
About 3 weeks ago, I think Bush was reported on the Fox Opinion Dynamics poll to have an approval rating for his job as president at that time at about 45%, I think. I think last night or two, they have said that the approval rating has now gone up to about 52%. Well, about 3 weeks ago, when it was down at 45, don't know who, but somebody in the Bush-Cheney campaign said, if the rating goes below 40%, there's no way that Bush can win. He said, on the other hand, if it goes above 50 and stays there, there's no way he can lose. I'm asking you, David, you agree?
Well, I think that certainly is an important measure. There are other important measures, the right direction, wrong track on the country, which has been in the negative for the last several weeks and months. I'd also tell you that the Washington Post poll had a different, they had his unfavorable job approval rating at 52%, which was the highest that it's ever been. So, there are a lot of polls out there, and it's very dangerous to kind of hang your hat on any single one of them. I think it's fair to say that it is absolutely insane to say that George Bush can't get reelected, and it's absolutely insane to say that he will. I think this is going to be a closely contested election. But I will say this, I think the job approval rating is important. But I think if he is still hovering, in a tie race going into the final weeks of this campaign, I do think that he will lose, because I don't think, an incumbent president is going to get the break on an undecided voter.
Judith Reese, former U of I trustee. David, how come there's the talk about Bill Richardson for Veep has just died off in recent weeks? I can't believe that the D's are going to pass up a chance to put the first Hispanic on a national ticket.
Well, he's a really interesting guy. It's not just the first Hispanic, but he's got foreign policy experience.
Yeah, and a governor.
He's a governor. He's got congressional experience. In many ways, he has an extraordinary and unique profile. And I can't tell you exactly why. He is a flamboyant person. And flamboyant.
Well, John Edwards is not shy.
I mean, a different kind of flamboyance.
Oh.
And I'm not suggesting anything. I don't know anything, but I mean, you could see it. There was some of you may have read the New York Times Magazine profile of him several weeks ago, and I think it reflected some of that. And so maybe there's some discomfort with that. I don't know, but I share your view that he is an interesting and appealing person, and I have to assume that there's some other reasons that we don't know that he's not,
Has he tried too hard?
I don't think you can try too hard in politics.
No, I mean to be the VP.
No, I don't. Well, I think there are others who are trying a lot harder than him.
Oh.
No, I don't think that. I don't
Okay.
think that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joyce Saxon, City Club board member. David, what's the word out of Springfield? Are they going to make the deadline?
Well, I don't. My guess is not today. So, which is why Barack was so thrilled to go down there. And I think there'll be a resolution, because there has to be a resolution. Eventually, I think everybody understands their responsibilities. It seems to me that there's been some movement. Governor's made some movement on some points. And I think the Speaker wants, he doesn't want this to go on and perpetuity. So I think that there will be a resolution, and I would guess that it will be within the next week or so. Perhaps by early next week. But I don't have any. I'm not a part of those negotiations. I don't have inside knowledge. I'm just glad, as I read the papers, to see that the Republican Party is as discordant a family as we are. So.
Follow up. Any idea what would be cut for them to get to this resolution?
Well, I mean, obviously, the governor has some spending priorities that are going to take a trim because the speaker is not going to yield, I think, on the full amount of borrowing from funds and is not going to yield on some of the business taxes. So, and the two areas that that gained the most are healthcare and education. So I have to believe that there'll be some give there. But, yeah.
Hi, Cynthia Coble, and a member of the City Club. I wanted to ask that there's so much of the population that does believe that we have a reason to be in Iraq, and we're losing money. You know all the things that are going on, obviously, so I don't need to reiterate, most people here do. When do we take off the gloves in a presidential election, and who is the one that will probably be the one to point these things out?
I have to understand your question. Are you saying there are many people who believe we shouldn't be in Iraq or
No,
should?
many people believe we should.
Oh, I see.
And that we need to stop terrorism there before it comes here, and just confusion.
Well, I think, as I said before, the science of politics has evolved in such a way that we can almost identify the people who are going to decide this election, and they're the focus of a lot of attention. Most of this country is very divided right now, and there are many people right now who know they're voting for John Kerry, many people who know they're voting for George Bush, and then there are these cross-pressured voters in the middle, and they may instinctively want to support the president on Iraq. But I have to tell you that there are some profound questions, too, about the cost in terms of human life, the cost in terms of money spent, which is going to be astronomical, and whether, in fact, we have reduced the threat of terrorism. I was really excited last week when the administration released the terrorism numbers about the great progress we were making, and only to find out that they were off by 100% or so.
I think I want to know that who within, as the election comes closer, would that be the vice president's job to start pointing these things out, or someone who's going to take the gloves off?
Well, I mean, I think that certainly the traditional role of a vice presidential candidate is to be an aggressive proponent of our positions. I'm sure that'll be the case. But Iraq's a very, very sensitive issue, and I think we have to make a reasoned case. One of the things that I tell everybody, all Democrats that I know who have a strong negative feeling about Bush, is that the people who are going to decide this election don't think like that. They want to support the President of the United States. They think he's a decent guy trying to do the right thing, but they're not sure he's doing the right thing. And we have to talk to people in a way that people are willing to be talked to. And if we try and impose our views on people, I think that we're more as likely to drive them away as bring them to us. Yeah.
Bill Bonaparte, simple question. And as the election has progressed, John McCain's name was thrown out,
Yeah.
and everybody was talking about McCain being the number 2 guy, and he's recently come out, campaigning for Bush. And you've just mentioned the possibility of another Republican being the number 2 slot. Is there some
Sort of
value?
a Republican.
Well,
Tom and I will agree he's sort of a Republican, Bill Cohen.
I mean, but that you did infer he was a Republican. Is there some value in having just kind of floating the fact that we might have this?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know who was floating what and how this all came about. I think that there's no doubt that Kerry's relationship with McCain is a positive, is viewed positively by the Kerry campaign, because I think swing voters view it as positively. It's a way of certifying his moderation. and so on. And so to have him out there as a potential vice presidential nominee is probably not the worst thing in the world. The danger, of course, is that he would become, and it almost tipped over a couple of weeks ago, that it would become such a obsession that anybody who did become the vice presidential nominee would look like the second choice. I think we've crossed that Rubicon now. And I think as for McCain campaigning with Bush, he's been pretty candid from the beginning that he's supporting Bush. He's running for re-election on the Republican ticket. They went out on defense issues on which, he feels strongly. So I wasn't that surprised to see him out there campaigning. He hasn't deceived anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Betty Lou Saltzman.
I know.
Friend of David's.
Yes.
Question I haven't had a chance to ask you is if you would evaluate the Senate races around the country, see whether or not the Democrats will be taking over the Senate and the possibility of them taking over the House.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the House is a lot more difficult than the Senate. Just the numbers and the nature of those races, and with some of the changes that have happened in Texas, where they famously did a redistricting that caused everyone to scatter to neighboring states for a while, hide all the state senators. But the Senate, I think, is certainly a more interesting issue. The margin is slim right now, and in Alaska, I think you've got an even race for the Senate. There's an open seat in Colorado where I think that's going to be very competitive. Both of those are now held by Republicans. I think that we have a good chance to win this race here against whomever. And then, the key becomes some races in the South. You've got a series of Southerners, Democrats who are retiring, including Senator Edwards in North Carolina, in Hollings in South Carolina, Graham in Florida, and those races become pivotal. If we can win one of those Carolina races and hold Florida, and then the other race of interest is Bro's seat in Louisiana. If we can hold, 3 of the 4, I think we have a real shot. So, and some of it will have to do with the Senate, with the presidential race. We all remember 1980 when the race broke late for Reagan, and changed the nature of changed the Congress in a profound way. I don't anticipate anything like that, but it's certainly going to have an effect. But I think the Senate is in play this year, and I think the Obama Ryan race or Obama Republican race is going to be important in that equation. I think that Kerry would, and I think that increasingly vice presidents we've certainly vice presidents have become more and more important to the point where some of them even run the country. But I don't think that would be the case here. But I think that he would assign important responsibilities to the vice president. But I do think one of the issues that Kerry is thinking about is the chemistry between him and the people he's talking about. But I don't think anybody on that short list would be on that short list if he thought that he couldn't work with them. So I think that decision has been made. Any of these people are people who could work with him. So I'm just still awestruck that you picked Dan Quayle. It takes a certain left-handed thinker to...